Hi, good morning, class. This is the first week of the session of this is week one. I would like to welcome everyone to the course. This is, and I got our class up here, but this is Business Law 310. Basically, we're going to do as kind of a quick overview, we're going to take a look at a few topics in the legal realm, kind of an intro to the law, in a sense, kind of learning about the structure of government, the sources of law. We're going to take a look at different aspects, different avenues or aspects of the law, like, what are contracts? We're going to take a look at tort law, maybe a little bit of criminal law, just to kind of get you exposed to the different areas of the law as well. So it's a really interesting class. I think you're going to find that it's helpful to understand, if you're keyed in a little bit to, the news and politics, this is going to be helpful to understand some of the pieces involved when you hear about the government and what's going on, and notably the Supreme Court as well. But it's also to give you an understanding of kind of a broad overview of what the law is about, the variety of ways that it impacts your life. And then, this is a business law course, so we're going to take a look at it from more of a business sort of viewpoint, but do realize that a lot of what we talk about can apply to your own personal life, even if you never sort of go into a business field at all. Okay, so what I wanted to do here this week is sort of a light week in terms of material and uh, assignments. It's more of a get to know you week, kind of a ramp up week. What I encourage you to do, so some things I want to review very quick, is make sure that you go and click on the syllabus. Got a pink. Let me do blue. Well, let me do black. Click on the syllabus, and that's going to actually download. Here's the file for you. I encourage you to do that. Let's take a look at it real quick. And what it does is sort of just lay out the course, if you will, what the course is all about, some of the learning outcomes. And so, but what you want to go down here towards is really maybe here's the grading distribution, but then two, go down to the weeks, and you'll see, kind of what we have to do each and every week. So this is the first week due by the end of uh, Sunday. So you have the discussion board, and remember, you got to respond to two of your classmates. And I'll be in there too. I'll be responding. So I'll look forward to seeing you all there. Make sure that you read and review the syllabus. That's what we're doing right here. And make sure that you take the syllabus quiz this week. So that's really the only assignment that you have to do. Though I recommend you go ahead and start reading chapter one and chapter two, just to kind of maybe lighten your load for next week. And I've got something in the course to help you with that. So as you can see the sort of the structure as we go along, starting in week two and whatnot, is that you'll have a reading assignment, you'll have a discussion board, and then you'll have a quiz or other assignment to go with it. And that's kind of way each of the weeks work after that, except that in week four and in week eight, there are larger exams. Week four is going to have a midterm exam, and week eight is going to have naturally the final exam. The final exam is comprehensive. It's going to cover everything in the course. It won't be available, neither the midterm nor the final exam will be available to you until that week. So there's no starting on it early. Um, uh, just kind of, it's just a quirk of the course. Just we need to make sure that we keep it closed. Anyways, because I've had students who do it and it kind of just do it early and it just doesn't go well. So we've restricted it until then. And it allows me to make some tweaks too as we go through the session in case I need to. But one thing to be mindful of each and every week is that with the discussion board, you're going to have your main response and you're going to have two responded to classmates. I encourage you with the main response to be in there by Wednesday or Thursday and then come back in the weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday to respond to your classmates. Be on the lookout for my follow-up questions to you as well. They're designed to help you, explore a little deeper with the material. So do be on the lookout for that as well. Okay, so that's the syllabus, and let's kind of go back to the course a little bit here. And week one material is already here. This is the assignments for this week. What I encourage you to do, and here's how you go, whoops. Here's how you go and access the discussion board and the syllabus quiz. But let me go over here to the video resources because I'm going to refer to those both this week and next week. And what I like to do is I like to throw in additional resources to help us with the material. The first 2 weeks, week one, week two, It's all about the separation of government, the fundamentals of the legal system. And what we're going to take a viewpoint on is the fundamentals of the federal government, the sources of federal law. And in that regard, that's the executive branch headed by the president. Congress is the legislative branch, and then the judicial branch, which is the court system. And we're going to talk about separation of powers and checks and balances and whatnot. So that's going to be one thing. So I encourage you to review these videos because I think they're helpful to understand sort of the setup and the and the fundamentals. Then there's a video here on federalism, and basically all that is just we have a two-tiered system, or we have a dual system of government governance in this country. We have a federal government and we have state government. That not every country has that, and that was at the time when the Constitution was ratified in 1789. That was actually pretty unique in the world. Now, a lot of countries have it. They've mirrored us because it's been so successful. But it's an interesting thing, and we'll talk more about that as we go along. But there's another video on that. It looks like I have a broken link here, so I need to go change that on my own. Okay. So I encourage you to go ahead and start reviewing these video resources. They're not that long. They're entertaining. They're about 10 minutes long, and most of them are pretty darn entertaining. And so you can rewatch them again and kind of pick up things that you missed. But I have video resources pretty much in every week, things like this that I encourage you to review as well, because I do ask questions from the videos too. It's not just the textbook, it is the videos as well. They're meant to supplement one another because the book is good, but it doesn't have everything that I want to cover. Okay, so on that note, let's talk about the textbook. Let me switch gears. Here is your textbook. Now, I just downloaded it from Kindle, so you can get it electronically. You can get it through Amazon, whatever you want to do, however you want it, whatever your mode of delivery is fine by me. It's offered as an ebook. That's how I did it. So first 2 weeks are going to cover chapter one and chapter two. So I encourage you to go ahead and start reviewing that as well. And really, let's talk about some of the stuff is we're looking at the interaction of the law, or fundamentally, we're looking at how does the law and business interact with one another. And I think you'll be surprised at how much the law touches everyday aspects of running a business. I think you'd be surprised at how much the law touches your personal individual life on a just an everyday thing. For example, you go to McDonald's, you buy a cheeseburger, guess what? There's the law just right there. You may not realize it, but that very transaction of buying a hamburger, cheeseburger, whatever from McDonald's, that's a contract, and contracts are guided by the law. And we're going to talk about contracts later in the course, but virtually everything you do in your life is touched by the law. And so that's the wonderful thing. It's also the frustrating thing sometimes. So first week's material, first two chapters talks about the sources of law, the different areas of law. I mean, you have business organization, taxation, intellectual property, employment. Employment is what I do a lot of. Contracts, sales, leases, finance, accounting. Sources of America law. I'll go ahead and start just kind of overview a little bit here. But when we talk about American law, what are we really talking about is what do we mean by the law? And we mean basically three things. We mean the Constitution, okay, that's the U.S. Constitution, and also state constitutions. Louisiana has a state constitution that governs affairs of the Louisiana state government. So you have the U.S. Constitution. That's all the things that we tend to, as everyday citizens, tend to be more familiar with the Bill of Rights, the First Amendment, Second Amendment, freedom of speech, right to bear arms, all those different amendments. We tend to be more familiar with that, and as we should, because those first 10 amendments were directed to protect our rights against the federal government. There was a fear back in 1788, 1789, when the Constitution was being debated, that the federal government would become too large, too powerful, and use that power and turn that power against the citizenry, naturally, because they had been subject to the tyrant king George III. Uh, and so the Americans at that time felt that they needed additional protections against the government, and that's why the Bill of Rights was passed, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, those very things. There was, by the way, not everyone was on board with the Bill of Rights. That was pretty controversial, actually, and because a lot of people thought that the Bill of Rights was unnecessary because what fundamentally the Constitution does is it directs what powers the federal government has. So the thinking was if the federal government doesn't have the right to do something, then it can't intrude on those personal liberties. So, for example, nowhere in the Constitution does the government have the ability to regulate your speech, what you can say, what you cannot say, things of that nature. So the thinking was, well, if the government doesn't have the authority to do it, then they can't do it at all. So the First Amendment right to free speech is not necessary. Well, as we've seen, I think James Madison is the one who thought of the Bill of Rights. I think he was very prescient because, as we've seen the federal government do, particularly in recent years, is the federal government will just do things. And unless unchallenged, they will keep doing things. And so I think the early Americans sort of figured out that we don't know what the federal government's going to do, but we do know the nature of power, and the nature of power is to keep taking more power. And we have to protect against that desire to increase power. And so the Bill of Rights came along. So, anyways, my point is, and I kind of got myself off track, is the Bill of Rights is the things we tend to think of first and most, but fundamentally, the Constitution is a roadmap for the power. It's really just an allocation of power. The Congress can pass the laws, the Congress can design the spending. Every law that's passed has to start with Congress. The president enforces, has those set of powers. He's the head of the military, head of foreign policy, all that stuff. And then the courts adjudicate disputes between private citizens and between the government and citizens. And so they have their roles, they have their specific powers, and that's fundamentally what the Constitution is about. But it is a legal document. It's not just some protestation to say it's not like the Declaration of Independence where we're sitting there declaring our grievances against the tyrant king and what we want and kind of the messaging. It really is a legal document. And so if the federal government cannot point to a provision of the Constitution that permits their action, it's probably unlawful and they can't do it. That's why we say unconstitutional is because the government has to at its core find a provision that allows it to proceed to act in the way it desires to act. Okay, so that's the Constitution. But then you also have statutes and laws passed by Congress and the state legislatures. Those are the things that we tend to think of most in that, think of tax laws. Congress is saying you have to pay these taxes. Uh, uh, Congress is saying you have to, or the state legislatures, issue a speed limit. Those rules of the road that they give you. And most of the laws that Congress and the state legislature pass are laws that say you can't do something. Think about all the laws that you know of. Most of them, I bet, would be here's what you can't do. Some of the laws, sometimes like laws of taxation, say here's what you have to do. So think about the rules that you have to live by, and a lot of those are passed by Congress and the legislature. Now, another source of law, let me give my book. Another source of law is, here we go, uh, what we call case law, court decisions. Uh, Not so much in Louisiana, or not as much in Louisiana, because we derive from the Spanish and the French traditions. But the rest of the 49 states, except for maybe California and Texas too, everyone else derives from the English system. And the English system is the cases can be laws themselves. Because the whole idea is that the legislature and Congress cannot pass a law or rule on every aspect of life. So there's going to be disputes as to how the law should apply. What does the law mean? Courts have to step in and referee those disputes, and those rulings guide a situation that the original law maybe didn't account for. And so those cases become laws themselves. And so courts will use those opinions, those case rulings, to justify when new issues or new problems arise. They'll say, well, this case said it this way. My case looks very similar to that, so I'm going to follow the rule that was adopted by that prior case. So cases themselves can become sources of law. Okay, so that's one of the things we're going to be doing is looking at the sources of law. You'll see here in the book, it's talking about the common law tradition, and that's not really a thing in Louisiana. And in fact, we're pretty proud of the fact that we don't have common law. But a little dirty secret when you become a lawyer in Louisiana is we apply the common law just as much as everyone else does in the other 49 states. We just don't tell people outside of Louisiana that we're actually also following the common law. But when I say common law, what we're talking about is that very thing that I mentioned just a minute ago, where cases become law. Cases are sources of law. So if an opinion is rendered in say, a property dispute between two landowners, neighboring, and we look at it and say, well, property owner A won the case under this set of circumstances. I'm going to look and see if my case, how close and similar it is to that, and tell the court, hey, because my case is similar to that prior opinion, follow the rule, and here's how you should, and I should win. And so then the opponent says, well, no, my case is different because of X, Y, and Z, and so you should not use that rule, and instead use this rule because it's similar. So cases become a source of law. That's what the common law is all about, is you try to find a case that is similar to in fact pattern and try to follow the rule. And that's the notion of precedent and carrying forward a rule at all times that promotes consistency and stability in the law so that everyone knows what the law is and what the rules of the road are. That's a big deal. There's another area called administrative law you'll see here. And the reason for administrative law is because going back, the executive branch creates regulations. And these are clarifications. Regulations in and of themselves are either clarifications of the law or sort of implementing rules to implement the law. So, for example, if you pay your taxes, Congress says you got to pay $5. Well, the executive government department branch has to set up rules for how are you going to determine what that $5 is? Because sometimes it's based upon different numbers, but then two, how are you going to pay it? You need rules for that too. So Congress will make a law, but the federal government has to uh, invoke or create additional rules to actually put that law into practice, where the rubber hits the road, if you will. And that creates a whole new system of rules called administrative law. And so if you want to go fight those administrative rules, that's a different sort of venue. So if you have a tax dispute, you can go to what's called tax court and fight those rules over there. Immigration is, well, no, immigration is it's not no, it's something different. So, anyways, so if you have a license issued by the state government, like you're a massage therapist, you're a dentist, you're a lawyer, you have your own sort of licensing body, and if you ever get in trouble, or if you ever have a dispute with the licensing body, maybe they're saying your license is suspended, or you need to apply for a new license, or here's a fine, or something like that. That would be administrative law. You have to work through the administrative agency in connection with that license. So licensure is a big deal with administrative. Okay, so I wanted to kind of review chapter one just a little bit. Classifications of the law. What we're talking about there is, difference between, say, criminal law and civil law. That's one of the big deals. We tend to think a lot of the law in terms of criminal law. Those are the crimes, murder, assault, battery, any law that any crime, if you go to jail or pay some penalty to the government, speeding, those are criminal laws too. Uh, so anything where you're going to go, jail term or a fine to the government, that's typically criminal law, not always, but typically criminal law. Civil law is when we have disputes between citizens. You have a contract dispute, a company charged you too much to your credit card. Now you got to go get your money back. Well, that's civil law. Civil law means contract disputes or disputes between private individuals. No one's going to jail for this. No one's paying a fine. These are disputes as to you have a dispute with someone else. Got to resolve it. Businesses have disputes all the time. There are different ways we can invoke the civil law. So civil laws has a lot of different topics, and we're going to talk about a lot of different things in the civil law. Criminal law is pretty sort of closed off. It's the crimes and the penalties that we know of. You see all the cop shows. That's what that's all about. Okay, so I wanted to quickly review chapter one. get you to start taking a look at the book. Do I encourage you to sort of get ahead, read chapter one, look at those videos, get started on that. That way you have some kind of lighten your load a little bit, because it can be a lot of reading material, if you will. And so, if you have any questions as you go through the week, let me know. Happy to help out. Hope you found this interesting. Hope you found the course interesting. Let me know. I've been a lawyer for 20 years. I love it. I didn't design to be it was never my plan to be a lawyer. As kind of sort of just fell into it, if you will, a little bit, kind of backed up into it. And it was a happy accident. So I'm glad I did it. I hope you enjoy, our discussions of the law, and hope you have a good session. Look forward to working with you, and we'll catch up with each other in the discussion board and also in next week's Zoom. Okay, bye bye.